So I love role-playing games, but it wasn't like that for a long time. In fact, for about 20 years, I was not really into them. I thought something was wrong with me. And it turns out nothing was wrong with me. I just wasn't playing them the right way for me. Hey, so my name's Ryan. I knew that I wanted to get a little bit better at making videos on YouTube before I made this video. I wanted people to understand how much it changed things for me. To help you understand this story, we need to go back like 20 plus years in the past. So rewind and let's go back to early 2000s. I was, I think, 13 years old and I had just gotten into D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you remember that feeling when you first learned about role-playing games or Dungeons and Dragons. Like it was that feeling of like possibility, like anything could happen. And there was just this giant world out there for you and your friends to explore. I remember that, we did not have a lot of resources. The internet was still kind of new. And I remember going to my local library and I would basically get my hour or whatever of computer time. And I would use that hour to search up and print off adventures, dungeons, anything I could get my hands on. Like I just threw it in like a huge binder that I had. And I kind of was hacking it together at the time without realizing it. The memories lasted, we rolled the funny dice, we made jokes, talked in funny accents, we pretended to be our characters. My friend had this big board that he had made and he had like a dungeon on it and he had like places for our character sheets. It was really cool. I mean, it was really impractical too, but it was still really cool. When I was growing up, I basically thought that you could only play D&D in like two ways. Like there was just this way and this way, no other ways. And the two ways I thought you could play D&D were either the dungeon master had to meticulously craft and create every single detail. Like they had to create every single little part of the world. Just ridiculous amounts of preparation and work were required if you were going to play this way. The other way that I thought you could play, so Dungeon Master prepares nothing and you guys just wing everything. And it always led to like lots of laughs, but like nothing really of substance or worth remembering. It was usually just us messing around and, being murder hobos or whatever. So as I got older, my social groups kind of changed. And I remember that I started playing Warhammer 40K and the people that I played games with kind of changed. I kind of stopped playing D&D around the age of like 16 or 17. So have you ever found yourself drifting away from something you love and you realized that you had kind of drifted away from it and you made attempts to come back to it? Like I remember trying Pathfinder with some buddies and I was so stoked, I was so gung-ho to play this. And the party couldn't get along, everybody was arguing, they were fighting over loot, they like couldn't decide where to go next. So I remember that really fell flat. Okay, so then I remember when 5th edition was coming out like 10 years ago and a lot of people were really excited for it. I got the D&D core books. Like I was going to create and play my own 5th edition campaign and it never panned out. I was in the military a long time ago and I didn't live close to a lot of the people I had grown up playing games with at the time. And as I got older and just responsibilities, life and everything, I kind of just put D&D to the side and I was like, at some point maybe, So what if the game that you once loved no longer sparks joy? What if you've changed? So the turning point for me was at the beginning of this year. I got invited to play in a 5th edition campaign. And I remember being excited again. I was like, all right, this is it. I'm going to play with people who are experienced, who know what they're doing. The Dungeon Master is experienced. He knows what he's doing. He's created this homebrew campaign. So I made this character and we got ready to play 5th edition. I'm friends with all the people in the group. I like them very much, members of my family and other close friends. And something felt really off to me about this whole thing. And I don't know if I was nostalgia chasing at the time, but I just found myself really not enjoying the game. And I started to think that something was wrong with me. I was like, why can't I enjoy this thing that I want to enjoy? Like that I really want to play. I kind of like argued with myself internally about it. And I kept playing for, several weeks. And then finally, I was just like, I can't do this. And so I talked to the Dungeon Master. And he was cool with it, which is, good on him. And I stepped away from it. And I gave away my 5th edition books. And I just made up my mind. And I said, you know what? D&D, whatever it is, like, it's not for me. I don't know what it is, but role-playing games, they're just not my thing. And I kind of realized now that I was still looking at D&D through this like weird, distorted like lens from when I was younger. Like I thought there were only, you know, 2 ways to play. You're either winging everything or, you know, you have to prep everything to like an excruciating degree of detail. Like it's like a part-time job. And then around the same time, I started kind of getting into solo role-playing. And I remember thinking this was part of the extension of like, I think there's something wrong with me. Why don't I like this? Why can't I get into this? And I think originally that was kind of my objective with solo role-playing, is like, I wanted to figure out like, what's the missing ingredient? Like, what am I not getting about role-playing? What am I not getting right? And I was noticing something very interesting from solo role-playing. So it was almost uncanny to me how much more interesting solo role-playing was. And I thought that must have been from me coming up with story elements on my own. And I think in part, some of it was that, but I think there was more to it. So as I was getting more into solo role-playing, then I, you know, was reading more RPG discourse online, which is something that admittedly I hadn't been involved in. And I saw, you know, the term OSR being mentioned, and I looked it up and saw, you know, it's old school D&D. And I thought, old school D&D. This must be purely for the nostalgia of like the old game. And I didn't put any more thought to it than that. I just kind of like thought, okay, old school D&D. And then I remember when I played Scarlet Heroes, which is a solo old school D&D style game, then there were some weird things about it to me. Like I was like, this is different. And one of the things was on the character sheet, you know, there were no skills. And I remember thinking, you know, every RPG that I've ever played had, you know, this character sheet full of skills, and pretty much it was like, yeah, you were good at searching, you were good at acrobatics, you were good at swimming. And so I thought that was interesting, and so I started looking more into, you know, what made old school role playing like old school. I saw the book for Old School Essentials at a game store, and I remember looking at that and being like, oh, this is that OSR stuff. So I opened the book and I started reading it. So it said, if you are new to old school gaming, go check out the primer for old school gaming by Matt Finch. And so I did. If you haven't read it, I'm going to link it. And I remember that I was sitting on my couch reading it, and it was just like a light turned on in my head. I had like this huge like light bulb aha moment that happened to me. This for me was absolutely mind-blowing. Like it just blew the lid off in terms of the possibilities. And I remember thinking, you mean you can play D&D this way? Like you mean that there are more ways to play D&D, and people have been playing these ways for years and years and years? And it was almost like a little bit upsetting, because I was like, man, I thought for like 15 years or whatever, I just don't like D&D. Like it's not for me. Something's, maybe something's wrong with me. But it's not for me, because every time I try to get into it, it is just so difficult. But the things in old school gaming that were so appealing to me, and I knew at that point, man, this is the thing. This is the thing that I've been searching for, that I didn't know I was searching for. Like that's what it felt like. And I remember being so excited and just like so thrilled by this, finding this, OSR style gaming, that like I couldn't sleep that night. Like I was like, just like my brain was like going, my brain was going full speed. And I was like, yes, I'm going to play OSR games. Like I remember going to D&D night at my local game store. And I remember going and asking somebody, they're like, oh yeah, come play with us. Yeah, let's play. And I remember saying, okay, does anybody play like OSR style games here? Or does anybody play like Old School Essentials? And I remember people looking at me just like, dude, nobody plays those games here. We all play 5th edition. Like you have to go to a convention if you want to play an OSR game, whatever that is. And I remember being like, wait a minute. So nobody knows about this? Like that's how I felt at the time. I know obviously now there are a lot more people that know about this stuff, but I remember like explaining this to my friends. Like I'm like, guys, we've been playing D&D wrong. Let me explain to you how we should play it. Like this is so much better. And I remember them being like, are you okay, dude? Like, and it, it's fine. It's not just the 2 ways that I thought you could play growing up. So yeah, I want people to know that The OSR is a thing and it exists. There's like this whole world of games out there. There is like an 800-pound gorilla in the room called Dungeons and Dragons, modern Dungeons and Dragons. And it's okay, you know, if that's your game, that's fine. But if you're like, man, 5th edition's not really doing it for me, then please come on in and check out this giant world of all these awesome games that people have made. For me, it felt like rediscovering D&D from when I was a kid. It really felt like that sense of possibility came back. And, you know, I'm really grateful for that. I had no idea. I didn't know that the OSR existed. I didn't know that old school gaming was a thing, because when I started playing D&D, it was at 3rd edition. And 3rd edition happened right at the same time that the torch passed from TSR to Wizards of the Coast. And I think that when they designed 3rd edition, they made some really specific design changes to it. So I think they, you know, wanted to make the game more accessible to people. But I think that with some of that accessibility, there were trade-offs created. I think that it became a lot easier to not have to actually describe what your character is doing in a given situation. Like, put yourself in there and think about what you would do if you were in that situation. I think the word that I'm looking for here is verisimilitude. And that's that feeling when you're, you know, reading a book or playing a really good role-playing game where you put yourself into the character's shoes and you imagine what they're seeing. And it's like you're there. And so I think that with old D&D, this like lightning in a bottle that it had that kind of like swept the nation, if you read about the history of old D&D, I think that it was rooted in a lot of that. And just seeing like this entire world of games that existed, this like secret world before it had seemed secret to me, I realized like, wow, anybody can contribute to and make this stuff. Anybody can make an adventure. Anybody can make a supplement. Like, yes, you're going to have to work on it and iterate on it. But it made me realize like, wow, I really want to create stuff. And I want as many people that feel so inclined to get on board with these games, to start buying these games, to start supporting these creators, to start making their own games. I want more people who are curious to get into this stuff. And if you really like these games and you've been thinking about making something, I would invite you to act on that idea and explore it. Because you never know. Creativity leads into more creativity. Like when you do things that you've never done before, you discover things that you can do that you didn't think you could do. And so please, if these games like tap into that, then explore that. Like you could change your life. You could change other people's lives. I know that my life was changed by all this. Like I wouldn't be making YouTube videos if it hadn't been. I want people to realize that there's like limitless possibilities to the way that you can approach an RPG. The art of storytelling, you know, this is something that humans have been doing for thousands of years with each other. And we found ways to gamify it and make it really fun. So I encourage you to try to find joy, like in your creativity, in your creative pursuits, in the games that you choose and the systems that you choose. So yeah, I want to invite you to awaken your inner creator. There is an abundance of creativity out there for you to tap into if you feel so inclined to. And all you have to do is take that spark of an idea